Okay. Please give me a wave on Instagram if you can hear me. If you can hear me, give me a wave on Instagram. Give me a wave or just type yes in the text chat. Whichever one suits you, just a wave or type. Okay, great. This is breaking into, okay, I see a yes there. Thank you very much. Okay, breaking into and thriving in the C-suite. This is the second in the series of monthly fireside chats, which I started last month. And we looked at something very, very interesting last month. But this time we're going even much, much further. And today we're talking about breaking into and thriving in the C-suite. I have two CEO guests today, two phenomenal people. And I have been so looking forward to today. So looking forward to this edition. I've had brief conversation with John, brief conversation with Proscovia. And, so it's so good that this is happening today. Let me quickly run through a brief of introduction. John is the Chief Executive of the award-winning C-Suite network of businesses. Okay, C-Suite network is called Winmark. John is a former infantry captain in the British Army, believe it or not. John has, by now you've written 3 books, okay? So you wrote poetry books. John, your background is so diverse. Poetry, army, C-suite. What is happening here? We are going to get to know more about that in a minute. You have an MBA, and the latest book from your stable is called The Sweet Spot. What an apt title. What an apt title. And it's about reaching, it's about leading and delivering the C-suite. Okay. In your capacity, John, as the CEO of Winmark, you have oversight of 16 C-suite networks with 700 multinationals across 18 countries, including the world-leading Chief Sustainability Officer network. It's a pleasure to have you today, John. Thank you for the generosity of your time.
Great to be with you. And I'm slightly embarrassed because we don't have Uganda in the mix yet, but we will do very soon. We'd love to have Uganda. I apologize in advance for my
okay.
Uganda.
Thanks, John.
Not to worry, not to worry. And then we have Proscovia. Proscovia, our paths crossed about 7 years ago, 2016 at Imperial College Business School. Of course, that's where I met John as well in a different capacity. Proscovia, you are the CEO of Ugandan National Oil Company Limited. I believe since October 2019. You have a BSc in Geology and Chemistry. By the way, my first degree was in chemistry as well, believe it or not. You have MSc in Petroleum Geoscience, MBA Imperial College Business School. You also have a dedicated Wikipedia page. Awesome, awesome. That doesn't come cheap. And of course, over in the short space of time of being CEO of Proscovia, you've been reaping several awards that you and I were talking recently. And, there's a proposal, there's a suggestion that perhaps what you actually need is a room that can house all the awards. So maybe we need to think seriously, about how that will happen. Perhaps somebody's into real estate here. We may take advice from that. Proscovia, it's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you so much, Ayo, and thanks for the kind introduction. I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
All right. So before we get into the gist of it, what am I missing in terms of the introduction? John, what am I missing? Proscovia, what am I missing? Is there something I've left out? Something, that helps people to understand who you are and what gives you, the credibility to be talking about this subject matter today?
Okay, I can start, John, if you allow. Ladies first, I presume. So maybe what you didn't highlight, Ayo, is the fact that I've been by and large in the oil and gas industry for the last 23 years or so, starting off my career within the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development as a geologist and growing through the ladders. By the time I left, 16.5 years of service, I was heading the technical division And that's the same time when I started on the MBA program with Imperial College Business School. And then, of course, an opportunity opened up within the National Oil Company. I took up the role of Chief Operating Officer for the upstream segment, leading the technical team that runs the upstream business of the organization. And 3 years later, here I am as Chief Executive Officer for the National Oil Company. So it's been an exciting career journey for me, and I hope I can share my experience in the C-suite, but also growing through a male-dominated industry at that. So thank you, Ayo.
Awesome. What an entrance, what an introduction. I'm sure you certainly have a lot to share. You know, we're looking forward to that. John, what am I missing?
I think we've covered everything. I would leave it at that, and I think my career is not nearly as interesting, I'm afraid.
Okay, so let's take it further. John, you lead the network. All the things we've said about you, the networks you lead, you interact with several CEOs. You're not just the CEO of the organization of your network, but you interact with several CEOs across different levels and all of that. You know, looking at your profile, I see you also attended a school of CEOs. Never heard of that previously. You know, so I'm just curious, where did this fascination, you know, stem from? Where did it stem from? The fascination with the C-suite, the fascination with CEO. What is the motivation? What is the context? Where is it coming from? Would you kind of let us into that?
Okay, so why that community? I think because that community represents millions of people, and through that group, you can have you can substantially improve the wealth and lives of millions of people. So through leaders, you can have a much greater impact, and so that's the reason why we work with that community. And they're also all super bright, interesting people to work with. So it's quite a fun community to work with.
Awesome. I can bet it's a fun community with no dull moment whatsoever. If I come to Proscovia, so you walked us through your journey, you know, at some point, Chief Operating Officer, and then now CEO Proscovia. Have you always known you would end up in the C-suite?
That's an interesting question, Ayo. Absolutely not, I must admit. But well, having gone through, you know, all the different leadership levels at technical level, I thought I would challenge myself to learn more about the business side. Maybe just a little bit of background. I headed the technical division, meaning that I was in charge of all operations, in charge of approving development plans for the operators before we went into final investment decision, or before we issued the production licenses. Now, of course, by the time you move projects from the technical side to the commercial side, you start discussions with the business people or the operators in terms of what sort of development are you looking at, what are the commercial parameters for the fields, and how are we going to bring these fields on stream. So because I was purely from an operations background, I had to challenge myself. And I guess that's why I moved into the MBA space at Imperial College Business School. So that's when the opportunity happened to lead the technical team as a Chief Operating Officer for upstream with Uganda National Oil Company. And of course, I had a very young CEO who was my boss. And at no one point did I even know that, you know, she's going to leave her role. But of course, she gave me a lot of mentorship, a lot of, you know, job shadowing during the 3 years, until, you know, the time when she felt she needed to move, you know, to build on her other career aspirations. And then the space opened up. It was a competitive process. I interviewed for the job, and there I was. But I think regardless of whether I was really driving to become the CEO or not, because certainly this was an opportunity that came at a time when I didn't even know it would come. I think for me, the issue was being consistent in what you do, and, driving the purpose of an organization, especially so that we're setting up a new company right from scratch. The national oil company is barely 6 years or so old. So you can imagine, because myself, herself, and some few other people, we are really in the crux of setting up that business. So we bought into the vision. We knew what success looked like. We knew what we're building on behalf of the state. So I guess that also framed me in a way that I could actually competitively take up that role. But yeah, I guess I would have aspired to become a CEO sometime, but it came earlier than ever thought, I guess.
That reminds me of the Scout motto that encourages one to be prepared.
Yeah.
And just like somebody rightly said, success comes when opportunity meets preparation. So you clearly were prepared for the day of opportunity for you, and you made very good use of it. Thank you very much, Proscovia. Let me come to John. I'm still going to come back to Proscovia because you mentioned some key things. You talked about vision, you talked about purpose. Will be interesting to explore that. How do you drive vision across several levels of the organization from that level? We're going to come to that. But before that, when we talked about when we talk about the C-suite, we don't want to make assumptions here. I know everyone here would probably know that. We're familiar with CEO, COO, CFO, CIO, CTO, but there are some interesting ones that are coming up these days, like Chief Happiness Officer, Chief Evangelist, or something like that. Let us into some of the interesting ones you have seen, considering that you oversee several networks of the C-suite. Tell us more, about what you have seen, and also what you wish more people knew about the C-suite.
Okay, so first it's worth clarifying that the C-suite or top team or executive committee is on average about 9 people, and it has been 9 people. If I'm talking about public companies, I'm talking about large public companies. It tends to be 9 people, of which you tend to get 5 staff officers. So you tend to have a chief finance, chief legal, chief HR, chief marketing, and then an ops or IT person. Then you tend to get 2 or 3 divisional heads, if that makes sense. So that's a general format. And why I raise that first is that if you look at Wikipedia, there are probably 80, 90 C-suite roles. From take D alone, you've got data, diversity, development, and so on. So what's quite interesting about those, all those roles have to report into those 5 staff officers. And what that means is all those staff officers are actually generalists rather than specialists. So if you might be called chief legal, but actually you're doing a whole bunch of stuff. You might be your chief finance doing a whole bunch of stuff. So there are fashions in naming that come and go. We find sort of in Europe, because we've had the Ukraine war, there's now a chief diplomatic officer. That's a new one that's come through, but that typically sits with the group general counsel or chief legal officer. We find there's a general shift away from being called chief marketing officer to chief customer officer. So who represents the customer in the boardroom, and I think that's quite an interesting shift, because marketing slightly implies push, whereas customer slightly implies pull. So I think it's quite interesting shift. So there are lots of shifts going on. I think the finance functions, the chief finance officer is picking up on all reporting. Because even if you think about it, a finance function has always been a data function, and it's now picking up on climate diversity, carbon reporting, diversity reporting, and all the other areas as well. So I think there is a huge amount of change going on at the moment. HR functions and marketing functions can target individuals now because tech is so good. So I think there's a huge amount of change going on. I think the names are fashionables. Depends what you call them. If you go to America, they tend to be all quite grand titles. But one of the hardest things in life to do is change someone's job title, because a lot of status comes with a job title, and if you try and globally give everyone the same title, that can cause chaos. I know we had in FTSE 100, one of our members tried to give everyone the same job title globally, and he said it was, I could do pay rise, do everything, but job title was the most painful thing I tried to do. So I think it's a very emotive area, job title, because it keeps putting away their rank or status or power in the organization. And there's lots of change going on, and that will carry on. There's no doubt about that.
Awesome. What do we need to know about the C-suite that is not as explicitly known as you would love people to and wish people to actually know?
Okay, so a couple of things is what makes you successful in your early part of your career doesn't make you successful in the latter part of your career. So when you start your career, you learn your expertise, whether that's finance, marketing, HR, and so on. And then as you go through, you start running teams, and the teams get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you become a sort of good company officer as you add value across the organization. But when you're selected to go in the top team, it's your ability to go across the organization is the most important thing, then your ability to run teams, then your technical skill. So in a way, the importance of what you've developed over time reverses. And that's really important to know. The other big things are in the C-suite, you need to understand stakeholder management. And so below that, you really have clients. But as soon as you get into the top team, you have stakeholders. And that changes. You might have investors. I'm sure in Uganda, you've probably got the government as a stakeholder. So you've got really important stakeholders. And people don't experience that until they get to the top team. So if you can get early stakeholder experience, really important. If you can learn governance early, really important. If you can deeply understand your business model, people, you get a business school, people say, well, you don't need to understand how a car works to use it, sort of thing. But you absolutely have to understand how a car works if you run BMW. So I think there is you need to deeply understand how the business model works. Really important. You need to understand vision, values, stakeholders. Then it's about people performance, governance, and then the whole diversity and belonging. That's the whole team. We had a fantastic session last week with the CEO of Rentokil Initial, which is the 32nd largest company in the UK. And he said, he was asked, what is his job? And he said, my job is to get 45,000 people out of bed every morning to work performing well, and then tuck them up at the end of the night. That was quite an interesting way of putting it.
What a way to put it. And that reminds me of the conversation I had with Proscovia, a couple of days ago. And she was telling how she drilled down to the very lowest cadre of officers in our organization to get them to connect their activities, their tasks with the mission of the organization. Could you let us into that, Proscovia?
Thank you so much, Ayo, and thanks, John. It's quite impressive, a conversation you had with the CEO a couple of days ago. For me, I think when you're a CEO of the organization, three things are very critical. It's strategy, it's enterprise risk management, and it's talent management. And all of them are literally running at the same pace. You can't compromise, one of the three. I actually refer to them usually as a tripod, that without any of the three, you lose balance. Now, on the strategy piece, of course, as a CEO, your role is to be the ambassador for strategy. You're the person who's in charge of the strategic direction for the company. So you need to define the purpose for the organization that resonates with the customers, but at the same time resonates with the staff in the organization. So, of course, as you said, the direction, the vision, you need to know what success looks like, and then you need to be intentional on selling what success looks like, so that everyone buys into the vision for the organization. To the point of how far down do you go to advocate or to push for your strategy, I think, it's limitless, because I was telling Ayo a couple of days ago that I personally, as a CEO, I want everyone, up to the security man at the gate, up to the driver, to know the purpose or the reason as to why they wake up every day to come to work. And the purpose we've defined internally, at least, to get the oil out of the ground and contribute to economic transformation. So it was interesting initially when you talk to the driver about the strategy, and they were telling you, I come to work to earn a paycheck. I come to work to drive my boss. I come to work to drive people to the field. It's not enough. I think they need to buy into what they're doing and see the major fundamental change that they're contributing to the organization, but to also the country. So by the end of these sessions, if you moved around and asked any driver, any person in the organization, they know the reason as to why they wake up every day to come to work, to get that oil out of the ground and contribute to economic transformation. So, and we shouldn't also forget that every staff in the organization is a brand ambassador for the organization. So if you sell them the vision, they'll sell that vision to someone else. And remember, the environments where we work in, especially the industry that we work in, is being attacked so much that sometimes we lose the social good and focus on, for lack of a better word, on protecting the environment, which we know we should do, but there's also the major benefits that are going to transform our economy. The other thing, of course, that you need to drive in terms of strategy is you have to be obsessed with excellence. If you're not obsessed with excellence, you're not going to bring something that is more superior than anyone else on the market. So you inculcate that culture of excellence in the organization. You make sure that there's consistency. You revisit the strategy. You realign your team on a regular basis to make sure that they do not veer off the major strategic goals. And of course, as you do that, you always identify the low-hanging fruits that allow them to keep the pace, celebrate the wins, and continue with the momentum without losing the momentum. Now, of course, as a CEO, I touched on three things: the strategy, enterprise risk management, and talent management. For enterprise risk management, we work in an industry that is faced with a lot of risk, be it volatility in prices, changing landscape for the oil and gas sector. You're looking at renewables, you're looking at geopolitics, so on and so forth. And these create a lot of transactional holdups that end up making you, slow down on projects, lose costs. You end up getting into cost escalation and maybe lose schedule for mega projects like the ones that we deal with. So as a CE, you have to be alive to these changes globally, but also on a local scene, because ultimately your role is to make sure that you're on cost, you're on schedule. You're not going to end up getting cost escalations because you didn't, identify something that is major impacting on your projects. And I like what John said earlier, the issue of stakeholder engagement. I think it's underrated by CEOs, but yet it has a major impact on our ability to deliver what we set out to do. And this stretches again from your shareholders to the board, to the staff, to government that John talked about, to local communities, project affected people, civil society organizations. And I think recently you saw, I think earlier on this week, what happened on the sides of the Africa Energy Week with people, carrying placards for Stop ECOP, energy transition, and all this stuff. So as a CEO, you can't sit down. You need to really push the agenda for the company and also, explain to people. Sometimes it's just a matter of fact that maybe they are not informed and they need to be informed about the reality so that, you get the buy-in. And lastly, of course, is the talent management, again, which touches on the strategy as well. And I always tell people that the team you build is the company you build. There's no question about that. If you do not hire the right people or the right talent, you can't build the right team to deliver. So you need to be intentional on creating, winning teams that are more of comrades, right? There has to be that comradeship so for you to get a winning team. And alongside that, of course, is the issue of culture. Because in my experience, when we were setting up the National Oil Company, we were attracting people from different walks of life. People who are coming from private sector, from civil society, from government, from parastatals. So you ended up with a blend of culture, and if you do not manage it quite quickly, you end up getting silos within the organization or siloized culture. So we had to be intentional, and we developed a culture code anchored on 5 pillars But in all essence, it was defining the do's and don'ts of the organization so that whoever walks into the organization knows exactly what they need to do, what they should do, and what they shouldn't do, as long as you're staff of the organization. So maybe lastly, and sorry, because I'm the ambassador of strategy and so passionate about it, the last one is to expose people. And again, in my experience, I always say that you do not want to build an organization that is full of people who are skilled at doing the wrong thing. You need to expose them because, you know, the markets are changing. There's technology advancements. There's so many, you know, moving pieces that you need to expose your staff to so that they become innovative, they become agile, and so that you're able to pivot your strategy. You don't lose focus on the main goal, but at least you're able to change the methods of work to make sure that you get to the ultimate goal. So in essence, really, an engine can only be good as the fuel that you put into it. So why not really develop a pipeline of talent that you get that super fuel that can, you know, propel that engine. So I think we have to be intentional, but the three are supposed to be running concurrently. You can't lose grip on any of the three.
That's strategy, that's risk, enterprise risk management, and talent management, if I got you right.
Yes.
Now, Proscovia, you touched on some other things. You touched on culture. Culture is so powerful. Like it's been said, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
You know, you can have the greatest strategy, but once the culture is not right, it just falls down the drain. If I come to John, you have a book on this subject we're talking about today. Your book is called The Sweet Spot: Reaching, Leading, and Delivering the Sweet Spot. Let's talk about what it takes. And I'm sure a number of people here are keen to know, in addition to what they already know, what am I missing in terms of my journey into the C-suite? What am I missing? What do I need to know? And I know, you know, having hosted a webinar where you spoke, John, you came fully loaded, you came with frameworks, you came with different things, you know, which with we don't have the luxury of time to dive into all of those things. You even went as far as to suggest the age somebody should be hovering around the C-suite, waiting to break in. So can you go to town, John? Let us into what does it take to break into the C-suite? What should one know? What should one do? You know, and I'm reminded of this framework from Harvey in the PI framework, you know, that suggests that there's a performance element to successful career, but there's also the image element, there's also the exposure element to sponsors and all of that. So interesting to know your thoughts, John. What does it take to break into the C-suite?
Quite a big question, because it takes quite a lot. I think going back to what Prosy said, I think it is actually actually says it's about defining the purpose in the role of CEO. It's defining the purpose, and it's all about executing the strategy and bringing the people with you and doing that in an excellent way and turning all the people into ambassadors. But I think, and so that's what the CEO role is. If you can bring that forward in your career, that's a super useful thing to do. If you are known as being an excellent operator, really good at executing plans, and really good on people management, that's going to be a huge asset on the way up. I also think one of the key things that people don't forget, people tend to try and do everything in a linear way, whereas lateral moves can be really important in careers. Because if you think about it, if you're, say, in a certain industry, you've only worked in one part of it, when you go to the sort of top roles, you need a much broader view. So if you've done lots of different roles within the same organisation, you get that broader role. So I think actually lateral moves can be much more important than in a way vertical moves. And a good example of that is is a guy now who's the CEO of a FTSE 250 bank. And he started off at Barclays Bank in his career as a retail banker. He was retail banking, and he ended up running bigger and bigger areas. Then he realised he had no experience of how the group Barclays worked, so he went to work for a strategy function. But to do that, he had to turn down a £20,000 pay rise. That's a lot of money in anyone's book. So he turned down the pay rise. That's also a difficult conversation with your partner. And so he turned down the pay rise, did the lateral into strategy function, where he stayed for 3-4 years. And then he realised he had no international experience. So again, he jumped into a state which had a lot of corruption. He had to deal with the corruption in that state, in what Barclays had been doing in that state. But he said if he hadn't done those things, he could never have got into the top jobs. He wouldn't have understood how the whole machine works. I think that understanding the business model is really important, and that you have to be quite brave for that, because if you're just an accountant or just a marketing person, you sort of got to become a general manager. And there's a really interesting fact in this. If you look at the S&P 500, so we assume, and I assumed, and I always ask when I do the Imperial MBA, I always say, where do you think most CEOs come from? And they all go CFO. Typically CFO is the big response. And that's just not the case. If you take the S&P 500, 90% of CEOs come from general management. So the divisional leads been promoted up into the group leads. And so actually getting those general management roles are really important. Another fantastic lady who was a general counsel. And she said, and she always worked with lawyers and she advised on big deals, but she never actually owned a deal. Quite interestingly, she'd done all these great things, but never actually owned it as a project. Because he wasn't the business owner. And so she knew she should make the transition on that. And she said it was actually quite scary. Because she was a lawyer, she used to working with lawyers, and she was really good at that. She didn't know she was any good working with marketing people or tech people or other people. So she made the transition, and you said it was really weird because they do properly think differently. Marketing people think differently to accountants, to techies, and so on. And so actually, you've got to learn how to manage different people from different backgrounds, from different life experience and all these things. And that's a really important part of your management journey. So my big thing is breadth. In the end, breadth trumps depth. So I would try and get breadth in your career would be my top tip.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Breadth trumps depth. Do you agree, Proscovia?
Well, I totally agree. And I must admit that, going through hierarchies, if you're only structured or unidirectional, you're going to find it extremely difficult within this role. But maybe just to supplement on what John submitted, is the aspect of also making yourself a bit vulnerable. And I say this cautiously, that some people find it a little bit difficult. As a CEO, you're expected to be, the brain of all things, the one driving everything. But when you make yourself vulnerable, then you open up to other people guiding you or giving, those ideas, especially when you're seated with an executive committee of experienced people. And I found that quite useful because in my experience, like I said, of course, I was managing teams fine, but it was all within one domain. But when you're running a company that has, subsidiaries, that has 12 business lines, you can't be someone who knows to the depth of detail for every project that you're dealing with. So sometimes you need to allow for the external to guide your decision making. Not that they will be the one to make the decision, but at least you allow room to interrogate your thoughts in a way that will allow you to make the right decision. So for me, I believe the executive committee and their wealth of experience, I know you touched on the CFO, you touched on the human resource officer, you touched on the general managers for subsidiaries. I think you need to allow them to challenge you to some extent, but you still remain, in control of the decision making. The other one that I thought that is quite interesting, and I got this one at the time when I was at the Imperial College MBA program, is the 4Ds. And I think you recall the conversation on this, that it's not everyone that thinks about becoming a CEO that would thrive in the C-suite you must have the desire to do that role. You must have the desire to make a difference. You have to have the desire to fulfill that purpose. And then you must be determined to make sure that actually you deliver on what you set out to do. Yeah, you must be dedicated. I mean, the C-suite is not, it's not, no one ever said that the job is going to be easy. Absolutely not. You're always going to be faced with challenges, you know, the different stakeholders, the different staff issues, but you need to be determined, you know, and lastly, you need to be disciplined. So I think for me, even those four are quite good ingredients. We may talk about leadership and, you know, in all the scholarly articles and whatever form leadership comes in, but if you do not have those four outright, the desire, the determination, the dedication and discipline, then you may not be able to deliver as a good CE for the organization. And of course, there are others like consistency. You must, you know, be consistent in terms of character and results. And of course, you know, be agile enough to recognize the emerging trends. You must be that spontaneous to recognize the changing, you know, trends, and then you pivot where necessary.
Wow, wow, wow. The 4 Ds and the C's, and then emerging trends. I'm going to get John to and I'm conscious we're getting to the top of the hour, to reflect on the future of the CEO role, because there's something I'm sure on the website, and I'm sure, you know, John can speak to this, you know, the future of the CEO role, to reflect on that. But as you talk about that, could you also infuse from the several CEOs you've been networking with, interacting with, the qualities that stand out? And this will be sort of complementary to what Proscovia has said. The qualities that stand out in the top CEOs that you have seen, and then also speaking to the future of the C-suite.
I start. So can you come down and I'm with myself on Zoom.
Okay. I'm to myself.
Okay.
So I was giving Prosy a bit of feedback. I like the 4 Ds. I think they're great. I think the 4 Ds are great, and it's really not for everybody, because these are big workloads. They come with a lot of stress as well. So you've really got to be up for it in terms of what you want to do. But if I look at the top CEOs, makes them different. I'm talking about the very, very top CEOs. They tend to be very, going back to what we said earlier, they tend to be very authentic people. They tend to be sort of at one with the world, and very happy to work with people. And what I mean by that is they don't see themselves as superior to people. I think that's really, really important point. So they're very good. I remember listening to Justin King, who ran Sainsbury's in the UK. He said, I don't really get this lonely CEO role bit. He said, I employ, 40,000 people. They all love me. How can I be lonely? There's got to be something wrong with me if I'm lonely. And I think people think that when they go into these roles, they need to sort of lock off slightly. I think there's something around sort of engaging with people. I think, and this piece was raised earlier about making your staff your ambassadors. To do that takes a lot of engagement, and that cultural piece that was being spoken about earlier. And so I think that's key. I mean, the role's not changing. The role is to set the strategy and direction of the business and then execute it really, really well. That's not going to change. The role of CEO is, I don't think it's changing at all. The environment it operates in changes continuously, and I think that will continue to change. I certainly think that CEOs need to be more now than ever engaged in their local environments. So people doing oil and gas, for example, there are, you impact schools, you impact education, you do. I remember when I did my MBA, people talking about a Mercedes SUV plant in the US, 400 million investment, but it created 2 billion of wealth, because all those people, buy food, they all go to have a drink in the evening. So the wealth it creates is enormous around it. So I think and therefore you need to engage with that as CEO. Increasingly, CEOs are in a way public representatives. They're not politicians, but in a way they sort of are. They have to operate, I think, slightly as that. And I think that is a change that is going through. But I think that's, in a way, going back to how life was 100 years ago. That makes sense. 100 years ago. 100 years ago, when you worked in your village and you ran you were the shoemaker, you were responsible for things. You know, and so I know in England, if you were the butcher was one of the most senior trades in the village. And so the family got some esteem with that, but with that came responsibility. And I do think a lot of corporates sort of in a way lost that responsibility. And it's very interesting. I don't know what it was like elsewhere, but in the UK, when you went through the Industrial Revolution, what was really interesting to see is the coal mines were owned by the city, were treated really badly, but the family-owned coal mines were treated really well. So there were strikes that the families would feed the miners, where the city didn't care. So I think this connectivity that we talked about earlier about culture and what Prosy is working on is so important. It's that people element, not just in the organisation. It's also their families and everything else that touches. I think your footprint of a CEO and the executive team is much more than I think that people initially realise. Like mine.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very sobering thoughts there. Having a footprint that goes beyond just before I come to Proscovia to reflect on, what her daily footprints might be like, we welcome thoughts, we welcome contributions, we welcome questions from the audience, either on Instagram or, for those on Zoom. I think there might be something already. Okay, so there's a question talking about the recording. Well, yes, both on Instagram, after the session, it should still be there on my page. You should be able to do that, watch it afterwards. And then we will review the recording on Zoom. And if it's suitable, we'll upload that to a YouTube channel. So definitely you can watch out for that. Okay, again, to reiterate, questions are welcome, comments are welcome, contributions are welcome. I know on this call, different people have different levels of organizations. Some CEOs here, some middle managers, senior level, early careers people. So we have diverse audience, which is fantastic. So let me come back to you, Proscovia. I'm going to put, these two questions in one. Okay, you are a trailblazer, by virtue of your gender in a male-dominated industry. So wanting you to reflect on one note, does that, sort of weigh more heavily on you in terms of how you do the role? Is it deeper? Is it more challenging, for women to both rise and to deliver the C-suite? On one part, but on the other part, if you can then let us, to the level you're happy to share, what does a typical day look like for you? And what do you need to do to ensure when you show up big, you show up awesome, you show up remarkable, and you give us the best self, just like you're smiling.
That's a fully loaded question, Ayo. But to start off with, being a woman in the CEO role, of course, I don't know how it works in the UK, but here I think generally women still have to work harder, if not twice as hard, to get to the position, or actually even show that actually they're capable of doing it. But I've always had this mindset that if God created us as equals, we shouldn't be fighting for the seat. We shouldn't be fighting for the seat. We need to just claim it back. So meaning that, it's all about the mindset. If you put yourself into a position where you're feeling inferior to your counterparts, then you'll always be leveled up to that match. But if you go with the attitude that actually I can do it, then you can do it. Yes, you may have to work twice as hard to prove it. Yes, society is going to look at you from different lenses. People are going to think you're being helped, you're being supported, you're being, it's okay, but always focus on the goal. Like I said, no one ever said it's going to be easy, and you shouldn't, walk away simply because you feel you've met, I don't know, for lack of a good example, let's say Goliath has come. When you leave tomorrow, Goliath version 2.0 will be around the corner. So you can't run. You have to face all the challenges up front and be able to manage. But in a regular environment, really, my morning starts with, of course, I'm Catholic. It starts with a prayer, for sure, before I start my day. And remember, as a woman, your mother, your wife, your friend, your sister, your everything. So then you drop off your kids to school, then you come into office. I usually log off between 6:45 a.m. to about 10 a.m., primarily to focus on strategic things. And remember, in Uganda, when you're the CEO, you're literally the accounting officer. So you're literally, carrying two jobs in one. So you had better make those approvals for finances when you're sober enough and not having a lot of interruptions. I try as much as possible to get focus moments on a daily between 7 to 10, or sometimes earlier, depending on what time I wake up. And then, of course, after 10, you're engaging your executive committee, you're realigning yourself, you're focusing on some of the few areas across the 12 different projects. And then, somewhere, in there, you may have scheduled meetings, which is okay. Remember, in a CEO world, stakeholder engagement is not programmed on calendar per se, because the nature of stakeholders that you have, if someone is rioting or someone is asking for compensation in the field, they're not going to wait for an appointment. Sometimes there are those impromptu stakeholder engagements that you need to handle. And at the end of the day, of course, you try to refocus on the achievements for the day, you're planning for the next day, and at least you make sure that the next day is already planned the previous day. I know that's not granular enough. There are a lot of permutations that could go around there, but of course, a self-reflection at the end of the day to, and again, I keep saying about the Catholic in me, that you always question, what good did I do today? What can I improve the next day? How can I make it better? We usually do that on a daily basis as Catholics. So, and then, the next day comes and it goes along. But that being said, of course, you can't have everything in balance as a mother, as a wife, as a partner, whatever it is. It's not always easy. Sometimes you'll end up, in an imbalanced position. But hey, you always try to pull it up as much as possible. And maybe, of course, something that I was touching on earlier on women driving this role. I think for me, what I've found out as quite important is being authentic. And I know John touched on this as deep as possible. I think while we sit in these positions, we shouldn't forget to be human. People come from different walks of lives. People come with different issues. You do not want to be that CEO who arrives in the morning and people are like, Mufasa has come. No, absolutely not. You want to be a CEO that listens to people and, supports them and, allows them to be themselves at work. And that's very critical. And of course, lastly, I always challenge myself in terms of being human is, what are you without the role? And for me, that's a very, very pain point, that today you're the CEO, but tomorrow this position is temporary. The CEO of the Uganda National Oil Company is always going to be here. But what are you without that role? And what would you have done to create a legacy for people, or to create a legacy that you can look back and say, yes, I was there. Yes, I'm a woman. Yes, I used the role to influence policy, to influence decisions, but to transform people's lives. So for me, at the end of the day, I want to use this role as a woman to transform other people's lives. And I want my name to be remembered, maybe more than the position, because, and I think we had this conversation, Ayo, last week, not only this week, that when you think about it all, at the end of the day, what is going to be engraved on your tombstone is not the CEO of UNOC. It's going to be your name. All right. So you need to work to be as humane as possible towards people, so that, you know, you can still invite me for a cup of tea after I'm a CEO, rather than, you know, avoiding me at all costs. So it's very important to remain human.
Awesome. What are you without the role? Thank you for reflecting on that and to see how your faith is impacting your work, faith at work. John, as we begin to, you know, wrap up this session, and I know, I doubt if we've scratched a tenth of the wealth of the knowledge that you're sitting on, John. I wondered if you can reflect on a couple of things. You know, Proscovia talked about what are you without the role. So obviously the role is going to be a temporary thing. I mean, you know, one way or the other. Or what have you seen? What trends have you seen when people exit the CEO role? What trends have you seen that is exciting, that is worth emulating? And then if I can squeeze another one into that, is there any question you were hoping I will ask, you know, to trigger some insights that you are sitting on?
I think, I'm on mute, still on Zoom.
I think Proscovia is entirely right. I think there is it's about what is your legacy going to be. I think is a really, really important part. And she's obviously a better Catholic than I am. They reflect every day.
But anyway, I will do it in future. But I think his legacy point is a really good way to sum up this whole thing. Because if you ask me who's my favorite business leader, it's now not exec, but he was the chief information officer of National Grid, who is the big in the UK, run all the infrastructure. Why I think he's fantastic is two reasons. Where role, he interviews the top between 60 and 300 people in his department, because he runs big departments, and then he interviews them with regard to what he wants to achieve in 5 years' time, not about today. And then he recruits a new team to deliver that 5-year plan. So I think that's why he does really interesting. And then what I think is an achievement is 9 other FTSE 100 CIOs were his number 2. I think that's an amazing achievement. So his legacy is that he's trained 9 other people to go up to do the same level of job as he has. So I think that is the way your reports go to in the future is a great standing of your legacy, because it shows how you develop them and that kind of thing. So I think that is a, but I think the point Proscovia raises on what you leave behind is absolutely the key part. Do you leave a happy team behind? Do you leave an organisation that's doing good in the world? And it's those sort of questions you want to ask us. But no one's going to write in a gravestone, I was CEO. But they might wrote, Proscovia was a good woman. And that's far more important.
Thank you very much, John. So I'm going to ask again, any question from anyone? Feel free to type that in the text chat if you have a question. If you're here on Zoom, I haven't seen any in the text chat here on Zoom, so I'm assuming no one has any question. Okay. So both of you, feel free in any order. Is there any quick word you want to just keep in, you know, considering all we've spoken about today, the theme and the focus of this session? Anything burning on your heart you want to unpack very quickly, maybe in a sentence or two? I
think I'll still grab the passport, John. Sorry, I'm a woman. I think again, resonating with the conversation we had, especially if you're a woman within the role, and I guess this goes out to fellow women, that we need to do more for sure, but I think we are flag bearers for other women. You know, we are flag bearers for other women to grow into these roles. And there's one thing that I always tell to female leaders or female executives, plus also other women in the organization, that whenever you rise up, don't stop there. Support other women. And there's a principle that I call the cross, or the female cross. At the top, don't think you've achieved it all. You need mentors, you need coaches, you need a support system, you need to look up to someone, you know? You need to have a role model that you look up to. And I mean, Ayo, you're there, you're my coach, and I always consult you once in a while. But you should always look up to someone. Then on the left and right of the cross, you need to maintain balance. You need the peers in the industry, you need the social system, your spiritual system, so that, you know, whenever there are turbulent times, you always call out to John, to Ayo, to whoever, so that you consult on them on the challenges that you're facing. And the bottom of that cross, please lift another woman up. Lift another woman up. So for me, that's, you know, something that I would leave to all other ladies on this call or in this session. And I hope you can use that wherever you are. Then look up to someone, maintain balance with your peers, you know, but also lift someone else to be a better version of themselves.
Awesome. So well encapsulated. Thank you so much. John.
I would sort of
build on that.
You asked me who the best CEOs
that I knew were. I also know a few CEOs who regret their lives, if that makes sense. And they typically regret their lives because they end up divorced or separated their family because they prioritize things slightly wrong. And I always remember I think in life you get these moments. I had a moment when COVID happened. And my wife is Austrian, I'm English. And there was a repatriation flight going on a Friday. It was a Wednesday dinner. She gave me a glass of wine and said, I want to be on that flight. I was going, wow, you want me to pack up my business into my rucksack and take it on a flight to another country, not knowing if I can go back. And the whole place shutting down. And meanwhile, I've got a company in meltdown going on. And the call is, this is more important. And so I think you sometimes do have to make calls in life, and sometimes that will slow down your career, and it might reverse it somewhere. But you'll never regret doing that. So you will regret going the other way. So it's slightly in line with what Proscovia is saying. Is you need to be a responsible person for uphill and treat them well on the journey. Keep in mind other points of it.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Thank you, Proscovia. Did you want to say something, Proscovia?
No.
Okay, I was just looking at that body language. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining. So this is breaking into and thriving in the C-suite. Of course, from listening to Proscovia and John, you know, if we had just one of them on the session, we could equally have spent this amount of time. And I doubt if we were able to scratch 25% of the wealth of insights, knowledge, and information they are sitting on. But I can't say thank you enough to both of you, Proscovia and John. Thank you for your generosity in being available today for this fireside conversation. People are asking already, is it being recorded? I can see Kalyani talking about it being a great session, and I hope everyone has gotten something or the other from it. This initiative is part of my passion to support people on their journey of career transition, leadership transition, self-optimization. You know, as some people might know, I wear different hats. One of it is being an executive coach, a leadership coach, or a life coach. I have a private practice called Emerge, in addition to working in the University of Chicago Booth Business School. I just love to coach and support people. If you want to dive into what we've spoken about today on a one-to-one personal note, it will be my pleasure to support you. Please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or through other means. On LinkedIn, you can get me there. If you need some support to break barriers, maybe shatter glass ceilings, let us work together. Just like Proscovia said, it's been my pleasure to, play one role or the other in our journey. Count it a pleasure. And talking about Proscovia, we had a conversation. So watch out for Proscovia. That's what I would say. Watch out for Proscovia. Amongst other things, he's looking to do, and I'm going to permission to let the cat out of the bag. She's looking to do very interesting fireside conversation with the CEOs she's been, connecting with. So that is something to look forward to. John, obviously, we've talked about his book, The Sweet Spot. I strongly suggest you pick your own copy, either on Amazon or on Bloomsbury. And when you do that and you digest it, I encourage you to leave a positive comment in terms of your experience. Please follow me on Instagram if you've not already done, to be aware of the next thing that is happening. I have a blog on how women can accelerate their journey to the C-suite. You can reach out to me if you want the link to that. There are several other blogs in terms of how to recover if somebody has experienced a challenging career setback and other things. So let's keep in touch and look out for the next initiative coming up from this space. Once again, thank you, John. Thank you, Proscovia. Pleasure to have you. If you can stay a couple of minutes so we can have a Zoom photograph or something. That would be, hopefully that can work out. Okay. Thank you everyone for coming, and I will stop recording at this time.